Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
But really, my goal of this whole situation is not necessarily to scale this significantly. I'm doing this as part of my retirement, and I enjoy the design process. I enjoy processing orders. I enjoy conversation with the various customers.
Welcome to episode number 590. Today, I interview once again Allen Boldt, who has a new invention since the last time I spoke with him. Allen Boldt grew up in the St. Louis suburbs. After graduating from college as a mechanical engineer, he started his career as a product design and automation specialist. He recently retired after over 35 years in various product development roles for manufacturers. He is a named inventor on many patents he helped in designing and developing over the years. Since retiring, he's been able to capitalize on having more time for his own inventions as well as hobbies. Allen has 4 brothers-in-law who are retired from law enforcement. One of them asked him to design a custom holster for conceal-to-carry purposes. He explained that while there were many such holsters on the market, all were too bulky and uncomfortable for everyday use. Using his 3D printers, Allen went through almost 10 prototypes quickly before settling upon a design that was more comfortable to carry, easy to conceal, and used gravity to hold the gun, making it much easier to withdraw. His GuntoWear product is quite challenging, as the holsters must be custom fitted for each pistol type. Even then, sometimes adjustments must be made. Today, he and his wife Lori are enjoying life in the St. Louis area. He enjoys creating and selling unique custom-made items from his home-based woodshop. Other hobbies include restoring and driving his classic and modern muscle cars, gardening, golfing, 3D printing, and hanging out with family. You'll want to listen to this entire interview where Allen describes the challenges of designing holsters with tight tolerances, uniquely fit to each gun model, such that it would be difficult for the invention to be licensable. Also, how he discovered this custom holster fit business was also a perfect fit for him as a retiree. He enjoys working with customers to ensure they are happy. Also, he found that the market demand is strong, sometimes causing him to actually reduce ad spending so he doesn't have more business than he wants to handle. And finally, why he thinks inventors must keep their eyes open for opportunities. The best invention ideas often come from everyday problems that someone else may bring to your attention. Now let's get right to our interview with Allen Boldt. Allen Boldt, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us once again today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Allen, I first interviewed way back when in April of 2024, which is almost 2 years ago, in episode number 402. For our newer listeners who may have missed that episode, you may wish to listen to it first and then come back to this episode. But in that episode, you shared that you had developed the Dirt Eraser, an innovative car washing system that can wash a car in as little as 10 minutes, while dramatically reducing wasted water and soap in the process. And then you shared the aha moment that struck you as a car enthusiast and caused you to invent a better way to wash cars. Now, almost 2 years later, you've invented into a whole new category. You trademarked GuntoWear, customized comfortable holsters for the in-waistband conceal carry. Can you share with our listeners what got you interested in this conceal carry holsters? And also, how does your approach work better than other holsters currently on the market?
Sure, glad to share. So, like any creation, it often starts with some kind of need. And in my case, my wife's family, or my three brother in laws, actually four brother in laws, are all retired law enforcement. So naturally, they're into guns quite a bit. And one of them is an actual gunsmith. So one day I was over at one of their houses, and my one brother in law approached me and said, "Hey, can you design and 3D print me a holster that I can use to conceal carry my weapon?" And I said, "I probably could, but why wouldn't you just go buy one? There's hundreds of them out there and a lot of manufacturers that sell very nice holsters." And so he proceeded to tell me why he didn't like any of them. He had tried quite a few of them, and he was telling me that they're either too bulky or too much work to install the holster. You have to feed your belt through, or the gun sits up too high to his liking, or another good one was the guns, and all of those tend to lock in place to keep them secure. So they physically lock, makes them a little harder to draw the weapon, and they're not that comfortable. So we got to talking, and he piqued my interest as an entrepreneur of that none of these gun holsters would fit. So we got to talking, and he started to describe his ideal gun holster. And by the way, he is also an ex firearms instructor for law enforcement. So his credibility is quite high with knowing what he's doing. So he started talking about how he would like to have a gun holster that's much, much smaller, more of a minimalistic approach, and one that really goes against the grain that the firearm does not actually lock in place. He said, "I want just a smooth draw." I said, "Gravity will hold it in place and a little bit of friction." We started to talk, and next day I started to create a prototype, and that led to about 8 or 9 prototypes over a series of weeks. And finally, I got to a point where I had a holster that I thought would work. And at that point, he liked it somewhat, but I thought, as an inventor, it's really important to test your products yourself as much as you can, as well as get feedback from others naturally. So I was not a concealed carry person at the time, but I borrowed one of his guns and started to conceal carry. But because I didn't have a lot of formal training at that point, I actually carried an empty gun for probably about a month, which my family to this day still makes fun of me for carrying an empty weapon. But that kind of was the start of that journey, that as I got to get some exposure of how does this holster feel and what changes would I make, I began to make additional changes. Finally got to the point where, okay, I feel like this holster is pretty good, and it's far different than other holsters out there because it's very small and the weapon actually sits at least an inch lower, which keeps it down in your waist better and also helps conceal the gun quite a bit better. And the gun doesn't lock in place. It just relies on gravity and a small amount of friction. And unless you're hanging upside down on the monkey bars, so that's all you really need. So it's how that journey started. It wasn't something I intended to do. It just happened organically.
The aspects that I think is of value for sure to our listeners. And one of them, of course, you had four brothers in law that were all retired law officers and such. So you had a good starting marketplace. And they brought to you what was a problem that didn't seem to be, and that was they wanted a holster for concealed carry that worked well. And your initial thought was, gee, there's a lot of them out there. But when you began to dig into it and do some further research, you discovered, like every inventor does, that there were some issues with what was out there. And one of them is the fact that they tend to lock in place, and gravity itself will take care of that. And also they are not terribly comfortable. And it sounds like they are probably not designed to be small, molded to fit the particular weapon, as I understood it. From doing quite a bit of research and doing quite a bit of testing, then you ended up creating, as they say, a better mousetrap. And I liked your story about carrying an empty gun around. You didn't have concealed carry. And I was thinking of Andy of Mayberry Barney Fife that never had any bullets in his gun hardly. So there you go.
The idea of having a gun that does not lock in place, it's a little controversial. There's some people that are more old school or whatever their background is, and they want a holster where that gun is secure and either with a strap or some locking friction mechanism. And then there's others that are perfectly acceptable to something new like this. So it's not necessarily for everyone, but it's carved out a niche that's working out well.
As you mentioned, you're currently 3D printing the holsters and then selling them via eBay. If each holster is made to fit a specific pistol, which I looked on the website and it looks like it's somewhat like that, what are a few of the challenges this presents in terms of either licensing your product or even just scaling up your offering on your own? Could you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, so as you said, each holster is an exact fit for a particular gun model, which is really nice because it feels custom to the consumer, and yet it's not necessarily custom, it's just made to fit really well. And one of the challenges with that, or that I found out, was as I was designing the first couple to fit the gun, I didn't think that would be a difficult task, but it turned out to be a little bit more challenging than I thought because as you design a profile to fit the gun profile, there's a very fine line of the gun is still a little too loose or even wobbly to within about maybe 10 thousandths of an inch. Now there's too much friction and the gun kind of sticks or is a little tighter than ideal. And that varies even a little bit gun model to gun models. That was the first challenge, is figuring out that sweet spot to get the fit just right. And then I also discovered that even the 3D printing process itself, there's maybe a very slight amount of variation from printer to printer or with different filament. And there's also some small amount of shrinkage that happens after the part cools. So all of those factor into a very precise fitting holster that is really good when it's finished, but it's labor intensive to do that or design intensive. And it also makes it a little bit difficult to scale. But really, my goal of this whole situation is not necessarily to scale this significantly. I'm doing this as part of my retirement, and I enjoy the design process. I enjoy processing orders. I enjoy conversation with the various customers. So you're right. It will make it difficult to just turn this over to someone else or license it or even to get others to make it for me. But at this point, that's not really my goal.
Point I'd like to take that you hit on there that I think sometimes inventors are challenged with, and that is they feel like, oh, if I don't make this a huge success, then it's a quote failure. If I don't scale this up, et cetera. And the truth of the matter is, you can make the enterprise whatever works for you. So if your goal is it's retirement and you want some extra money, but you also enjoy the whole process of selling it to people and creating a product that just really pleases them, that is unlike anything else on the marketplace, long term may or may not really scale into a big business, and you don't necessarily need it to do that, then that's perfectly fine. In other words, the business that you want that works for you is absolutely fine.
One other thing that I've found that's been a little bit of a challenge and continues to be a challenge is there are thousands of guns out there, and even one particular gun may have some variation depending on when it was made, even what factory it was made. They might have made some small little changes over time where maybe the trigger guard is a little bit taller, a little bit wider, depending on what year it was made. So you get a gun and you design a holster for it. Next thing you've got a customer that this gun is a little tight or a little loose. And after doing some digging, you realize that his gun is maybe an older model. And to me, that can be a little bit of a challenge or maybe even frustrating sometimes. But that's part of what makes this business and this hobby interesting to problem solve.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. In other words, you're doing something that's highly customized if you were to just boil it down into a short sentence. And that's just an accepted part of what you're doing. And you also highlighted the fact that even within a given gun and model, there's going to be variances, especially older or new models. And so therefore the fit will vary. So that does make it a challenge, certainly to make it sort of thought of one size fits all or anything of that nature.
Very true. And the one advantage I have being the designer and having 3D printers, I can, if I run into a customer that has that situation, I can make an adjustment based on his feedback and print a new holster pretty quickly and then ship a new one out. So it's highly customizable versus one that's mass produced.
Let me ask you a little bit more of a macro question. That is, how big would you say the market is for custom fit gun holsters?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm still figuring that out. I would say it's bigger than I originally thought. When I started this, I didn't expect it would continue to grow and continue, sales would continue. And so I thought maybe the market's fairly small. And of course, I'm a small fish in a big sea. But I started doing some research and I dug into a statistic that I thought was pretty interesting is what I found is there's approximately 500 million firearms in the United States, about 1.5 times as many people. So that tells you how big, that market is. Now, out of that big number, I'm sure a lot of those are not in the concealed category of a firearm. But even if you take that number and scale it back, you're scaling back a big number and you still end up with a big number. So I don't really know how big that market will be, but there's a lot of people with guns out there. And also there's a lot of manufacturers. There's probably, I'm going to guess, hundreds of holster manufacturers. It can be a fairly competitive marketplace.
That's a fascinating number, and that gives you quite a sense, the 500 million firearms. And then you could even break that in, as I suspect you have, in thinking, so what percentage of those are, for example, rifles or long guns, and what percentage of those might be handguns? And then within that, what within, say, the handgun realm, what would be the rough percentage of the ones that would be most aligned with concealed carry, for example?
And I'm not looking to capture a big part of that market as we've talked about. I just want enough to bring in some extra cash as a retiree and have a little fun on the side. So I just need a little small piece of the pie, and I'm perfectly happy with that. In fact, recently, over the holiday season, I got to a point where most time as inventors, you want to just sell as you start to sell your product. You're interested, your ultimate goal is to just sell more. I want to sell more and more. I finally reached a point where, which didn't take much, where I was actually selling really more than what I wanted because I was starting to create a little bit of extra stress with meeting deadlines and answering customer questions. And so I've learned there's a sweet spot of what makes me happy. If I sell too few, then I'm disappointed because I'm not selling enough. But there is a point where I go, this is too much. I want to scale back. So I'm figuring that out.
But it also puts you in a unique spot of anybody I've probably talked to in the podcast, in that it's dramatically easier to scale back than it is to scale up. So if the problem is that you really wish and want and need to scale up, that can be quite a challenge. But if you have as much business as you want and perhaps a bit more, and then looking for ways to scale back, it seems like that at least is an easier problem to solve.
It really is, and the way I scale back is just cut back on my advertising amount that I spend, and that's one of the things that I didn't do well with the dirt erasers. I did not realize that for most products, unless you're very lucky, you're gonna have to spend money on advertising, and that has to continue at least maybe until you grow the item organically enough that where you could completely not pay for any advertising. So that's the way I scale back or scale up a little bit is throttling that advertising budget.
Yeah. I'd like to ask, well, and what is next for you? And also, a dual question, How's your dirt eraser product doing? Is it continuing to sell well? And just looking forward, what do you see as your path in the next year or so?
Right now, I'm continuing to focus on this gun-to-wear product with holsters, continuing to refine the product itself to make it better, and continuing to sell and grow my clientele where I continue to have repeat customers and really focus on that in waistband concealed carry. There are some other aspects of that gun market that I could tap into. There's the open carry or outside the waistband market that's smaller, but I've had a few people approach me on that. And there's also some opportunity within the reloading. So a lot of people that do reload their own ammunition, there's different fixtures and different tooling that could be an opportunity to invent something there. As far as the dirty eraser goes, I've backed off on that a little bit. I had challenges where I was selling it through Amazon, and I didn't really have any challenges with Amazon per se, but it was just challenging for me on that to find enough sales and get things running smoothly. It's a very competitive car washing market. So I just decided for now I'm going to put that on the back burner. So I'm not really actively selling that while I focus on this gun to wear holster. And the fact I'm retired, there's only still so many hours in the day to focus on something. So right now that's my focus is with the holsters.
That makes a lot of sense to make it work for you, basically. As we roll towards the close, are there any parting words you'd like to leave us with?
I don't really have any parting words other than I would just encourage inventors. I've always been somebody that's looking for, let's say, a better mousetrap or looking for some need. And usually when you look the hardest, then you don't see anything right in front of you of something that somebody's not already done or done well, where there's not much opportunity. But if you continue to just keep your eyes open and keep your brain going 24/7 with respect to looking for a better solution to a problem, then sometimes things just drop into your lap like this gun holster thing did for me.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's aligned with so many other inventors that I've spoken to. Often something, just as you described, going on in your life will create that aha moment where suddenly you see a problem that you might not have seen on your own. In this case, your brothers in law brought it to your attention. One of the women that actually she was on Shark Tank and she did a product called Rinse-A-Roo, and she had a beach house in New Jersey and they'd have maybe a dozen guests and people out there. And of course, they're going out on the beach and there's a shower facility outside there, and everybody'd come in and be washing their feet and their dogs and pets, and there'd just be sand everywhere. And she found herself getting buckets of water and rinsing it out, buckets of water, splashing and cleaning up. She thought, there's got to be an easier way than this. And that's when she came up with the idea for like an extended shower head facility that could rinse that out very easily. And now she sells millions of dollars worth of Rinse-A-Roo, almost all of it on Amazon. And she was on Shark Tank. So it's amazing how that can go.
Wow. Yeah, you just have to have your eyes and ears open for something that maybe there's a solution for a need, and most people don't even recognize the need. And that's where inventors and people that are creative come into play.
My last question then, Alan, is how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions?
Probably the easiest way is to go onto eBay, and all you'd have to do to find at least one of my gun holsters is search for my trademark name, Gun to Wear, and that's GUN and the letters TO and then WEAR, all one word, Gun to Wear. It's kind of like underwear, but it's your gun you're wearing. And once you find one of my listings, you can then click near my eBay name and it'll take you right into my store. So I have an eBay store where you can see all the holsters that I sell.
They just go on to eBay and then basically search on gun to wear. And you said just like underwear, except GUNTOWER, they will find one of your holsters and it'll connect you very easily with your entire offerings there. So that's fantastic. Alan, I wanted to thank you for being on the podcast with us once again and also sharing the details of this new product and a really very different market than you were involved in your other product. So again, I really appreciate you being on the podcast once again, and maybe another 6 months or a year, we'll check in with you and see what you have going on at that time.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate your willingness to talk to me and have me on your show.
You bet. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.